Hey folks, and welcome to the show. Hopefully you can hear us okay. Please let us know in the chat if either the sound or the video quality is trash. Hopefully it is not. Joining me is our illustrious guest, Doug, from the Tabletop's Edge.
Hey folks.
Please check out his channel, which is linked in the video description if through some tragedy of justice you are not already subscribed. Your World in Flames playthrough is must-watch viewing.
Well, thank you. And I do promise this month we're going to start picking up the pace on that. So for those of you who've been very patient, I appreciate that. And it will be rewarded here as we get into March. I anticipate having more time to get the editing done and moving forward.
So we are drinking Balvenie 12 Double Wood, which is outstanding. We will have some special guests here live from Winterfest in sunny Sandusky, Ohio. Actually, weirdly enough, it was sunny today.
It was like 70 yesterday.
Yes, it was 60, but I mean, I was walking around briefly without a shirt.
Yeah.
So what we're doing here, I'm clipping. So funny story. Offensiva Outrance 1914, Mike Resch's game from GMT. I sold it a couple of years ago, bought it back from the same guy about 2 hours ago. And it's in state of clipping. It is exactly where I left it. So, which means partially clipped. So I'm just, picking that right back up because I don't have to do any math or anything. So, and Doug's got.
I've got Atlanta is ours.
Atlanta is ours. Yes. Join the club where the picture is reversed and you don't know why. So, God damn it.
Nope, just getting into GCACW. Looking forward to it. Been impressed with what I've seen so far with Hood Strikes North. So couldn't stop with one.
Yep.
Atlanta's ours. So that's what we got tonight.
So don't forget, folks, to subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed already, don't forget to thumbs up the video if you'd like to help support the channel. Also, Doug, remember to look at the camera and not the screen because I'm still doing that after 114 of these. If you'd like to help support the channel, the best way to do that is through the Patreon. I'm going to talk about that very briefly because I guess locking that door didn't work. Nope. Okay, so maximum security. So I made the announcement on the patrons only live stream, which will be released to the public on March 1st, that I will be making my STL 3D printing files available to patrons at the swordsman level and above. So if you'd like to get in on the juicy, sweet 3D printing action, the models are available, and they're already available to swordsman and above patrons, and I will be adding to that every month. So before we get going any further, I don't have the YouTube thing up, so we're going to actually do this the manual hard way. Let's give a big shout out to John C. from the sunny Philippines, Stacking Limit, Iggy Cricktal, Jeff Beeler, Charles Latorre, Chad Canetti, Armchair General Editor, welcome from Southwestern Ohio. I didn't know that. Stacking Limit, Ed Holtzman, Ray Garby, Rob Moffett, Chad Canetti, if I didn't get you already, Vicky, thanks for coming by, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, Rob Johnson, Jeff Anderson, Cal Harris, Strelnikov is here, Meandering Mike is here, Stuka Joe, welcome back to the stream, Joe. We're always pleased to have you here. Michael Schmaus, Mark McNair, the Stream Elements bot, thank you, Mr. Bot. The Command Tent, Vince Ree, the legend Fucko, who was, could have joined us live if he was here, but he had to go back to work today. So he was actually here for a couple of days and got to play some interesting things that hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about in about 10 minutes. See if Tom MC, Ray Musselman, Percy Block, welcome back. Garrison Venn, Jeffrey Benedict, Six Actual is back. Stigler is in the house. Oh, Stigler, you're going to love tonight's show. It's going to be fantastic. We got Doc coming on. It's going to be great. Daniel Silverthorne, Ye Old Geezer Gamer, Doug Blayart, Bill Thornton, Ed Holtzman, if I didn't get you already. I think I did. Brian Gash is here. John Clark, John Stanley. Tim Zales is here. Joe Okabayashi, I haven't gotten you yet. David Imperato, Hissy Cat Studios, Brent McCabe, Chet Bell. What else? Who else do we got? Alan Salazar, if I didn't give you a shout out yet, welcome back to the show. So, we're having technical issues already here. Todd Walser, John Longshore is back. Bis Nunya, Chuck Turner from Central Ohio, HUN 644. So welcome back, everybody. So let's talk about what we're doing very briefly before we have our first highly illustrious special guest brought in, my cousin Teddy. Just kidding. He's more illustrious than my cousin. If I had a cousin Teddy. Vakdam Rhine, Decision Games,
Yes,
Goss, Vakdam Rhine.
Yeah.
So how do we feel like that's going so far?
Well, it's a blast so far. This is first real big multiplayer, in-depth experience I've had with the system. There's a lot to like about it, but there's a lot.
There's a lot. It's a lot.
Stop.
It's a lot.
Yeah, Goss is. I mean, it's real puzzly if you like that kind of stuff. I tend to like the detail. It's got some really neat effects to it. I tell you what, it does a really nice job. I mean, a painfully good job of just showing the traffic problems and the terrain issues that were facing the Germans as they tried to push west. Because we're both the Germans. You're running kind of the southern.
Yeah, I'm running German 7th Army.
7th Army. I'm in the middle with 5th Panzer, and we got another guy going with 6th SS Panzer up top. So. No, I like it so far. I'm very impressed and looking forward to the rest of this week.
Yep.
And getting into more Goss games in the future.
Yep, we got a good 4 more days of this to go after tonight. And we're going to, after the stream, we are immediately going to go and run our combats over here too. So.
And the pace of play is not too bad, actually. We're getting about 4 turns a convention day in. We're getting about 4 turns of game time. We are coming up on the end of the 19th of December.
Yeah, this is 19 night.
All the 16, all the 17, all the 18, and we're going to wrap up pretty much the 19th tonight. So good pace so far for just 3 days.
Yeah, it moves, as we found with Atlantic Wall, and I was kind of afraid it wouldn't move as fast because Atlantic Wall starts with relatively little on the map. The logistics takes forever, but you're not starting with that many counters to push around. Here we're starting with a lot of counters. So my fear was kind of that play would feel sluggish, and it really hasn't. We've been clipping along.
I think so, and it really does break down this one particularly for multiplayer. There's some nice natural division of labor.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's the scenario, right? That's the bulge, right? It splits 3 ways very naturally on the German side, slightly less naturally on the Allied side, but it's they're still fine. They've still got plenty. Each of them have plenty to do. So 6 players total. So we did get this is not that clipper. This is one of my 2 other organ laminations counter clippers, but I did get the one back from the TSA. I took it out of the envelope, which looked like it had been in Afghanistan, and it worked great. Just took it out, didn't even have to wipe it off, so everything went great. So last year, if you recall, we had some significant technical challenges with this stream. So I hope that we have surpassed those now, because it's awesome to broadcast live from here and have people sit in on us and all that stuff. So I didn't want to not do it, but the upstream bandwidth is real shaky in most of this room. So our topic for tonight is how big is too big, and I felt like that was appropriate because we're playing a really big game, and it's a game, and I guess maybe the topic would be like how much is too much, because like we said, Goss is a lot, right? So I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces, and honestly, even though the system was built around Wacht am Rhein, there's still a lot of special situational rules and a ton of conditions that come into play if certain criteria are met, and you have to really pay attention to all of that stuff. In addition, and I'd like to know what you think about this, I feel like bulge games in general can be kind of brittle, right? Whereas, like, if the Germans don't get off to a good start, there's really not much point in continuing the game. I'm pretty happy with how we've done so far in the first 3 days.
Yeah, I think we got a viable game so far.
Oh, yeah, Absolutely. I totally agree.
But I have, like last Blitzkrieg, I love last Blitzkrieg to death. Fantastic game, but you get enough really bad snafu rolls on 16, 17 December, and there goes the game pretty much. I mean, it's out the window for the Germans. So, but that's not unique to that game. Like a lot of those games are prone to that.
Yes, I concur. And I suppose to some extent that's true in Normandy as well, right? If the Allied landings shit the bed, you might want to just restart. Right, and I've seen that happen. I didn't see it happen in Atlantic Wall, but I've seen it happen in Normandy 44. Right, if you just roll spectacularly badly on those 4 rolls for the landings, it's like, ooh, man. Or if you get one of the beachheads overrun, ooh, that's bad. So that game can go south very quickly. So I mean, maybe this is a common condition throughout. So I apologize for the background noise, but we have made the executive decision, to broadcast from the big room And there is a lot of hooting and hollering going on in here. So we apologize. And we brought the good microphone this year too, which unfortunately, I tell you what, let me, no, I'm not even doing that. I'm putting it into binaural mode. So folks, let us know if this sounds better with maybe less noise. So, but I mean, we had talked about Atlantic Wall for this event,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, and we tell us about why we decided not to do that.
Well, I think it was kind of a number of factors. One was player count. We were going to have 6 guys for the game, and you mentioned how Atlantic Wall counter density initially, particularly on the German side, is fairly low. There's not a lot for the Germans to do early on in Atlantic Wall. So what we wanted to avoid was a situation where, half the guys were kind of sitting around all week with their thumbs up their butt. And then the other consideration was Atlantic Wall is it's June 6th to August 23rd. So with 4 turns a day, there's no way you're even going to come close to getting through something like that.
No, you'd be happy to get to June 15th.
The first week or two maybe. So with Wacht am Rhein, it seemed to be a better fit for player count as well as the amount of time we have, because even though we're not going to get to January 8th this week, we're going to get at least to Christmas. And I think for many of the Bulge games out there, if you can get to Christmas, you're going to have a pretty good idea about how to call the game, whether it's going to be German or Allied victory. So that's kind of what ultimately steered us away from Atlantic Wall and into Wacht am Rhein. And plus, with the initial landing system with Atlantic Wall, it's super detailed, and you could burn easily half a day.
Maybe a whole day.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing for the German player to do really.
Except sit there and drink whiskey, I guess.
Exactly.
Great day, but not a fun wargaming experience.
Granted, there's not a lot for the Americans to do initially in Bulge, in Wacht am Rhein, but there is something for them to do. So. So that's where we ended up, and I'm glad we did.
Actually. I agree with that. And even in, there's many of the American units, almost all the American units, begin the game inactive, so they can't move around or maneuver or anything. But there's still defensive things for them to do when they get attacked. And as the game goes on, as you get in further and further turns, they've mobilized pretty rapidly to the point where they can get everybody actually moving around and doing stuff. So. So Stigler asks, is it terribly frustrating to play a big game knowing that you won't actually finish it? So I'm always happy to finish it to the point where we feel like we've come to the decision, right?
Yeah, that's kind of been my attitude towards the big games at conventions like this, because it's you've got Consim World Expo out in Tempe and here, and Buckeye Game Fest can be a nice long one. Going in that you're not gonna get 95 turns in, but you should be able to get a good chunk in and at least get to a decision point in the game where, like I said, you've got a good idea of how it's going to go from here on out. So. I'm not terribly concerned with that. I love playing the game. We're having a great time,
folks. I'd like to welcome our very first special guest of the evening, and we literally couldn't ask for a more illustrious individual. Dean, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
So we are live. This is how many people do we got watching? 132 people watching right now, which is the entire wargaming community on YouTube, as far as I can tell. You're here for Winterfest, and tell us what you've been showing off. Ardennes 2. So, the original is a legendary classic, right, at this point. So what changes did you feel that you needed to make for the revision?
There was a lot of cleaning to do. The original is a 30-year-old game, and we have a lot more Order of Battle Intelligence. My friend Jerry Axel found a complete set of the Army map service 1 to 50,000 maps of the area, which apparently are extremely hard to find.
Okay.
You'd think it'd be quite easy, but no, actually they're rare. And if you look at any catalog of it, you'll find that area of those maps just seems to have disappeared.
Might be collectible, in fact. Commemorative edition.
But in a way, we basically used all the research material of the game last Blitzkrieg from the BCS and pushed it into a 2-map package instead of a 4-map package, and made a much fancier version of the original game that's quite easy to play, but it works really well, and it has as correct information as possible.
Available for pre-order on Multiman's Publishing's website right now, folks. So head over there and pre-order it. Still needs 100 or 2 to make its number. So how did the game that you played here go? How was the result there?
We ended up with a straight-out draw. We went through 2/3 of the campaign game, and
in about 2 days, mind you.
And at that point, it was quite obvious that the Germans weren't going to take any more ground, period. They were going to start losing a lot of ground, and they were my Germans, and I apologize for that. But the draw count came from the highest single turn total of the entire game. So you have the
it's all good.
The best we had was that, and it wasn't going to get any better.
You hit the high side.
Wasn't any point in doing the last 4 or 5 turns.
Okay, great. So what else do you have cooking right now?
I'm working on the no turning back game, which is the Battle of the Wilderness for the line of battle system.
You showed off at Winter Offensive a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So how's that coming?
It's coming along quite well. Ardennes was moved in the slotting order so that actually technically no better place to. No turning back was before it in the sequence, so it was actually more advanced.
Okay. Yeah, we've been looking forward to that for a long time too.
And it also uses the LOB version 3 rules, which are new.
Well, let's talk about that then. What's new in LOB 3.0?
There's a number of very special things, but the most important thing is that you can combine movement and fire to come up with basically a column shift for your fires. So when you fire and you didn't move very much, your fire is better than if you moved a whole bunch and then you fired.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
And that also applies to artillery too, which is very different from the way it used to be.
Okay. Chad Cadady says that any of your games are an automatic buy for him.
Well, good.
So
That's
awesome.
Always like to hear from that.
So hopefully you've pre-ordered Ardennes too over at Multiman Publishing. So are we going to see no turning back on pre-order this year? I know that's not entirely in your hands, but best guess.
It should make it this year.
Okay, awesome. That'll be great. We'll be delighted to pre-order that along with the $1 million of additional pre-orders I have on order with them already. BCS. I want to talk about BCS because we've been playing last Blitzkrieg, as the viewers know, and we've been enjoying it tremendously. And I think it's like sparked me to want to design something, which would be different, but it would be inspired by that. Do you personally have a design in the works for BCS right now?
I do, but it's on hold while we're finishing up the current Valley of Tears, which is the 1973 Arab-Israeli War.
Okay. Can you tell us what it is, or is that still top secret?
By all means. It is the whole war. 3 maps for the Sinai, 1 map for the Golan, and you get the whole thing, the whole 9 yards.
That'll be awesome. That's going to be my very first game on the Arab-Israeli Wars. So, which is a topic I'm just like, I got enough. I'm good. I don't need any more. Well, I got to buy it. So we're going to be buying that. So probably some books on the subject shortly thereafter and all that jazz. So one of the things that we had a list of rules questions for you that I forgot to bring, but they were all trivial.
It's okay
things.
if you make them up.
That's okay. But sort of what was the inspiration for the activation mechanic specifically in BCS? Because that's the thing that I think I'm getting the most out of is it kind of distills all that command and logistics and operational boundary stuff and formation effectiveness all into kind of that one role.
Right.
What was the inspiration for that?
To be honest, I think I couldn't answer that question.
Okay.
I believe it developed over time because originally the BCS was designed to be a smaller scale level version of the OCS. But the instant I started working on it, I said, well, I can't make it the same thing, only smaller, because it was literally a different animal. Warfare worked differently at that level. And part of what was going on was it couldn't be, I go, you go, we're going to march through the phases and blah, 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 like you do in OCS. But you do have a individual formation. The individual formation has objectives that it needs to try to do. And its elements are all going to work together to try to accomplish them. And as a result, you have this ball of activity, which is that formation's behaviors, which becomes a single activation for your forces.
Okay, yeah, I mean it's real, the folks, that it just like materializes out of thin air is what happens when you're a genius. So I'm gonna make him turn red in the face. Would you like some whiskey, by the way?
Sure, now
There
especially.
There you go. So but we're going to send people off with whiskey as we rotate them in and out. So, Dean, thanks for stopping by. We'll sit down together tomorrow and have like a recorded thing that we can broadcast later on the channel.
Absolutely.
So, much appreciated. All right, thanks.
Bring your list of questions next
I forgot. I'll have to text our buddy back home who didn't make it to Winterfest. What were your roast questions again? Because Dean's here. I can ask him. Looks on the phone. So, awesome. Thanks.
Great cruise.
All right, thank you. So that was Dean Essig. So thanks, Dean, for stopping by. We got a couple more people who we're going to be rotating in and out as throughout the course of the show. No, you're good. You're good. Just let us know if you want more whiskey. So I need more counters, actually. Hold on. I got to get more counters. Yeah. Just in case the next person wants some. Oh, it's underneath. We're good. You good? Highly disorganized here. So for the next happy individual who gets to sit down with us. So the plan is to get to sit Dean down here tomorrow and get the OCS development crew together as well, and we'll see how that goes. So expect some more videos, and it's gonna be good. Folks, hopefully I did lower the stream video resolution to 720, and I think that should have helped the technical challenges a lot. So we had talked a couple days ago about TSWW, right?
Yes.
So
Second World War.
That thing, yeah. Where it's my position is like, man, it's just too much. It's too much.
No, I really think so. I've done a few videos exploring it. I'd like to do more, but of course, I've got the WIF project going on, and Goss. I've been trying to get ready for this game probably since last June. But I will get back to some TSWW videos exploring that. But my initial experience is there's a lot of interesting things in it. But sure. There's a lot, and one of the big things I don't like is the amount of calculations you've got to go through. They've got the combat efficiency value, the CEV. So if you're familiar back from the old Europa days,
the Tom Johnson Europa iteration.
There's math involved in pretty much all of these games that we play, but this is math where you're making some multiplication that is just, you can't do it in your head.
Right.
And there's
multiply by 1.27.
It's a comprehensive design in that he's factored in everything, but that's not necessarily a good thing because of the length of time it takes you to walk through and resolve a single land combat. That video I did was basically, it was an intro scenario from Acapale, and it's probably without you having me going through and explaining everything, it's still a 10-minute resolution for a single combat. Now, you multiply that out for something like Barbarossa, where you may be making 30 or 40 attacks in a single turn. It take you 2 days just to resolve the combat sequence. So, yeah, it's maybe some of the smaller scenarios might work. I really would like to try and see what the Malaya campaign in Singapore looks like, because there's not a lot of coverage at this scale, at this detail there. But I don't know that it's that may be too much of a good thing, this whole series. Yeah, and I'm happy to just say that's Doug Singapore behind us, but I've got Singapore as well, and I kind of picked Singapore on that basis, right? In the basis of there's a big campaign, but there's also a bunch of small stuff. Thank you, John C. from the sunny Philippines. This would be Scottish iced tea, however, just for the sake of clarity. And yes, in fact, the volleyball moms were here. I'm not sure if they're here tonight, but they were here the last night and the night before. They did stop in and say hello to us. A truly talented YouTube personality would have actually put them on camera and said, "So what do you think of these weirdos?" And I could have gotten at least 1,000 views out of that. But we do not have talent here at this. Well, we got Doug, but I mean, right here, there's no talent. So the volleyball, well, whatever. Yes, oh, that's too bad. I've just been informed that the volleyball moms have left. So the whole experience, if you didn't hear the story last year, that about, I don't know, 1 a.m. or something like that, a group of, let's say, volleyball moms that were here with their daughters for a local volleyball tournament
stopped in, and they had a very pleasant evening so far, and they hung around and asked questions about war games to the 5 people that were still hanging around up here. So it was quite, it was something else. Nothing crazy happened. So the whole story starts out, then you'd think it's based on a letter to a certain magazine that we shan't name on this show, but it was no less innocent and delightful this year. So hopefully we'll see him again next year. This is the 25th Winterfest, by the way. There will be no commemorative T-shirt. Thank you, T-shirt vendor, for fucking it up. So, did you order a T-shirt?
I did. A T-shirt and a sweatshirt.
Well, too bad.
Yeah,
so, sorry about that.
Yep. Just means I have to come back next year to pick them up, right?
So the knitting tips. Yeah, I made a knitting joke. I may have creatively slightly embellished that story, but the actual quote was real. It's just that the quote came from me and Curtis. Instead of the volleyball moms. But Clark Commando, this is Mark Ruggiero. Mark, thanks for coming. If you haven't stopped by the GoFundMe for Mark and his wife, please do so. They could use the help. Has played Barbarossa with 4 players. They got through 6 turns in 4 days, quite detailed. So 6 turns is 3 months. It is still 2 turns a month, right? 2 turns a month. So that's not bad.
No.
I mean, our joke was that we would see the Europa folks playing at Europa Fest at Origins every year. And we'd go in there on Thursday, and we'd go in there again at the end of the day on Saturday, and we couldn't tell that the front had moved at all. And that was, of course, we're talking Fire in the East and Scorched Earth, which, by the way, we are almost certain to play probably a 2024 thing, right? So, and I just bought a full spare set of Europa maps. Nice. So for $50, which ain't bad, right? For so yeah, because I needed a spare set of maps for one of the various secret projects that is in the works right now. So, so yeah, I mean, I feel like my tolerance. I mean, you and I have a very similar taste. I mean, my tolerance for complexity and bullshit is pretty high, right? I mean, I've got a whole shelf of decision games, for example. But I found TSWW from my perusal to really just be too much. And it was the CEV that really kind of killed it for me. That seems incredibly fiddly. Just the multiplier itself, I think, is inelegant and a hassle, but probably not a deal breaker. But then the CEV is then modified situationally to essentially serve as a DRM. Some of those things are optional, but not all of them are. And you can't just ignore it, right? Or the whole thing will fall apart, which is why Tom Johnson originally introduced that idea in the first place, right? So,
and another thing too, terrain, for instance, unless my memory's a little faulty, terrain modifies combat strength for the units, but then it also comes into play as a DRM. So there's a lot going on in there, and I'm sure it's like everything, though. We like complicated games.
Yeah, sure.
The more you play them, the more comfortable you get with them, the faster play goes. So I would, and there are people out there that love TSWW.
Oh yeah. Mark loves it.
I find it very intriguing.
Me too.
So where I'm maybe a little intimidated now, that might change over time, but I still think just the sheer physical size of it too is another issue, right? When you talk about big in war games, there's 3 things I think about. There's the physical layout big.
Right.
Is it too big for me to reach the middle of the table without breaking my back? Counter density, because you can have what I consider a big game on just 2 maps, but if there's 2,000 counters on that map, that's going to be a big game. It's going to take you a long time to work through stuff. And then the other one is time. You take any of these, most of these games behind us here, and it's going to take a long time to get through them. That's a big game in my opinion.
Have you ever played the SPI backgammon, Ryan?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, me neither. And it's my understanding that was a bit of a starting point for this system. But you can see just from my brief perusal of the original that they departed pretty fast, pretty significantly from the original, which I want to say was Joe Balkowski design. But I might be thinking of Atlantic Wall, Joe Balkowski's Atlantic Wall instead. I mean, I agree. And I am finding that for all the complexity, and there's a lot of fiddly pieces in Goss, it is, you get used to it, right? In the space of a couple of days of relatively intense play, admittedly, where we also don't have to stop playing and go to work. We're really picking it up pretty fast. And yeah, we're still looking stuff up kind of all the time. But we're looking up weird corner cases now, and they're not like fundamental rules things. And there's a lot of unusual effects in that game, right? Like the way the movement works. It's like it's a staggered movement system where you move different types of movement, move at different times, right? So you do your strategic move first, then you do your motorized road movement, then you do your off-road movement, which might include mechanized units, right? So it's interesting that you have to sequence your movement such that you don't congest yourself, right? In that sense, it's kind of similar to BCS, right? Although the effect in BCS is more between formations and not from individual units. The effect that you're seeing there is really just from the stacking, right? You still end up with columns lined up on the road in BCS. Right. And you got a 2 Panzer Division deep column lined up on the road in this game. So,
well, I plan on doing a video in the future once I get a little more Gauss experience, kind of comparing Gauss and BCS. And
that'd be an absurd comparison, a direct comparison. Yeah,
it fascinates me though because you've got 2 games on the same topic, both Battle of the Bulge games. They're at practically the same scale, but they are at what I would consider almost 2 ends of the, I don't want to say complexity spectrum, but complexity spectrum, where maybe detail might be a better word. Last Blitzkrieg spoiled me in a lot of ways for detailed games because I find it to be the most playable big game that I've
certainly on the Bulge,
because of Dean's alternating activation versus the I go you go. So in OCS where it's the allied player turn, okay, the Germans can go.
See ya.
I'm going
to take a nap.
3 hours, right? But with Bulge, each activation, once you know the system, 10, 15 minutes, you're done, and it's back to the other guys.
Might be 20 for like a real complicated, hairy activation for a big formation.
So it's an interesting take to see the detail that Gauss has. And there's a lot of, because you can't really kind of wing it in Gauss, particularly because of that movement order.
Oh, you will screw the game up almost instantly if you do not understand how that works, especially in the Bulge where it's very sensitive to opening conditions.
Exactly. So both games really do a nice job of illustrating the problem with the lack of good roads, the bad terrain, the tight terrain, but they do it in radically different ways.
Oh yeah, so radically.
I want to explore that kind of in detail in the future here, hopefully not too distant.
Yeah. So I mean that's. We got a question actually. Have you played Der Weltkrieg at all?
A little bit. I haven't. It looks real intriguing, but I haven't had an opportunity to kind of do a big. I know Todd last year I think had a big campaign.
Yeah, they had the 1915 campaign.
Looking at it, I've read the rules. I've gotten a little used to the maps actually, so I've had that much exposure to it.
Yeah, and then I've played Tannenberg. So, which is the intro campaign, which is a very nice intro. Actually, kind of shows you all the essential operational pieces parts, and that is an interesting puzzle-like movement system as well, which I really liked, especially when you start looking at how the rail moves work. So we are double fisting Scotch and coffee here because we intend to be up a good chunk of the night playing Empires in Arms. We might give them till 10 a.m. to get started on Gauss.
See, now Empires in Arms, that's a good example of a game that I consider a big game. If you're doing, certainly if you're doing the 1805 or 1792 campaigns, but it's a couple of good sized maps, but it's not huge. Counter density is really low in that game.
Pretty low, yeah.
But those campaign games are going to take you a while to work through.
That's not a one sitting game.
No.
And I haven't played it. I've read the rules, but even that's been a while. So we're going to lean on Jeff real hard to not have us screw anything up. But we're playing the 1813 campaign, so it's kind of intended to just be a taste for those who haven't played Empires in Arms before, like myself, or who have maybe not experienced it in a while. A unique game that I really feel like nobody else has done anything like. I do think the closest I'm seeing in that sort of space is probably Napoleon's Imperium from Compass and Andrew Rowland. But I mean, I'm saying that in the context of me thinking that Empires in Arms is kind of like a Napoleonic sandbox, and Napoleon's Imperium is like that too. If you are looking for a simulation of the Napoleonic period, I think both games are not going to be the thing that you should be looking at. what would be is a great question, and there's a number of options, and go see my Napoleonic Wargames video. So I would like to give a shout out to new patrons. We have a number of new patrons, which I didn't get the ticker ready. So sorry about that, Frank Davis. And hold on, I'll actually pull the card up. So we can thank the new patrons, and I don't have to stumble around looking like a dope. We're going to add an overlay for this. So talk for a while here, Doug.
All right.
Bail me out.
You know, I will say that prior to going to Con World out in Tempe and coming here last year, probably my best con gaming experience was actually an EIA game back at AvalonCon back in 1992. Okay. 7-player game, and that's where I think it really shines. A lot of it is the interaction. If you like a game with a lot of player-to-player interaction, diplomacy, that kind of stuff, negotiations, it's a fantastic system for that.
So picture diplomacy, but a war game, right?
Right. Yes, and it's. I've not seen a table flip with an EIA game though. So if diplomacy is something maybe you're interested in, but you just don't like the game for any number of very good reasons, EIA would be something.
Like that time you got punched in the face for playing it.
Right. I would highly recommend you trying to get a copy of EIA because it's got enough, I think, detail on the military side of things to make it an interesting war game. But it's not. I don't want to say it's not a complicated game
as such till you get to the economic the economic model.
But it really does put the whole thing together with the economics, because you're looking at both cash and manpower predominantly, and economics, diplomacy, and then the military aspect of it. And like you said, it really is a sandboxy game, which you kind of get from Harry Rowling. You look at World in Flames, you throw in a Daisy Decision, that gets real sandboxy in a hurry.
I mean, whiff out of the big boxes. Sort of sandboxy as World War II strategic global games go. And then you throw Days of Decision into it, and then that adds in literally an entire new layer of the sandbox below the sandbox. So, and we'll probably close the show with that because I want to talk about Whiff some as well, because that's another one of those things that maybe a lot of people feel is too much, that probably neither of us feel that way, right? So give me the whiskey too. So we've got a question from Bob Kowalczyk. First of all, Bob, welcome back to the stream. So last year here at Winterfest, like I said, it was about 1 a.m. And we've got this place to ourselves. Sandusky, Ohio is the Cedar Point resort town, and it's February, so the park's closed and we pretty much got the whole place to ourselves. So last year, it's like 1 a.m. The gaming's all done. We're just 5 or 6 people are sitting in here BSing. And, so people come in the room and there are these, middle-aged volleyball moms, and they're here, and they start asking questions about what we're doing, and we start explaining what we're doing, and we end up talking to them about wargaming for like an hour, and nothing weird happened. So we get that out there, but it was it just became a memorable story, among other memorable stories that I'm probably not going to talk about this week on the stream. We might mention it next week, so tune in next week to hear the story about the new Winterfest Code of Conduct that will be implemented starting in 2024. And it's going to say, Winterfest Code of Conduct, calm the fuck down. So, and it's the plan is that we're going to literally put it on the t-shirt. Code of Conduct, calm the fuck down. So nothing like that happened in our extraordinarily gentlemanly DOS game, fortunately.
No. And really, one of the reasons I was so excited to come back here this year is the experience last year was so great, because it really, just about everybody here, very chill, very relaxed.
Well, he wasn't here last year. So
there you go. So
that increased the chill noticeably. So, what's going on here? No, there was really, it was all very cordial and friendly, and you ran into somebody at the grocery store. Like I said, there was nothing weird about it whatsoever. There was literally no line, right? It is not that kind of a story. There's no table flip. Well, yet we might see table flipping. That could happen yet this week. Yep, pretty much. Yep. You know, we're delighted when somebody else is in the hotel with us, right? The one year it was Weed Fest, and I think there's like mini Weed Fest this year. Up on the third floor. You walk down the hallway, you're like, what the fuck? I'm not a person that enjoys that particular aroma, if you know what I'm saying. So something untoward happened, but not with the volleyball bombs. They were great. So, and you know, they know a bunch of OCD guys when they see it too. So it's not like that was a mystery. So, but you know, another thing is that we have a special guest coming in just a couple of minutes here. But well, I want to save for when we have a little more time to talk about that. So, other monster things. I mean, we obviously play a lot of OCS back home. We've done what I count. It's kind of 3, but I count it as 4 Europa games in the last 12 months, which is fucking remarkable, right? So, and you know, enjoyed every one of them, and bitterly cursed it out while we were playing every time. So. I mean, that's another example, right? Where it's this huge game. It's got like a lot of overhead. I mean, you could get smaller ones too, obviously. And I've got Balkan Fury for TSWW as well. Yep. And Balkan Front from Europa is, I think, a really strong little Europa game. And a good introduction to the system, a good operational puzzle if you have played Europa before. And you know, not enormous.
It's not. That's not big at all.
Yeah, and not. I mean, it's not. You're not going to play it in an afternoon, but no, but it's not an enormous. You could play it in a weekend very handily. Mm-hmm. Even in the the rulesier GRD version as compared to the original version. Mo from Mo's Game Table, welcome back, Mo. Frank Davis is here. Frank, thanks for stopping by. Thank you for becoming a new patron and reminding me. Let me get to the overlay first, actually, before I get to Frank's question, which of course is going to prompt me to think in silence for several minutes. So very big thanks to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair. Special shout outs in particular right now to Gary and Dale, who both stepped up, and to Frank, who stepped up as well, and to somebody whose name I can't read because I'm on the tiny laptop monitor, even though I could have brought the big monitor. So thank you, patrons. If you'd like to become a patron of Ardwulf's Lair, there's a link in the video description. So thanks for that. Now, kind of, I feel like as Europa evolved, right? It starts out as DNO and Unscheiden, and those aren't that complicated, right? They're relatively straightforward. You look at those maps and they're relatively plain, right? There's not much on them. And then you notice a definite increase in complexity with Fire in the East and Scorched Earth. And then if Total War starts, if it had ever come out, we're blaming Tony for this. You would have seen another, 100+ page increase to the rulebook. So joining us right now is the hottest new designer in Hex Encounter Wargame, Tony Burkett, Charles S. Roberts Award nominee. I voted for you, by the way. So you lost, but I'm sorry about that. But I voted for you, so it's a moral victory, right? So not an endorsement. So tell us what we got cooking here at Winterfest this year.
Oh, right. Okay. So I brought the whole Ostfront series of OCS games, which, from a design perspective, puts all the Third Winter, the next series game, the Forgotten Battles, which is Army Group Center, with Heroes City, which is Army Group North. Still a little bit of design, that one. With Crimea, which people may have seen in MMP, is in the pre-order, going to shortly be on pre-order.
Yeah, we're hearing real soon.
So if they all... This is the final playtest of this series of games. If they hang together as an entirety, you know that the individual modules probably play. So for those people who've commented, is that too much? Possibly. You're going to be fortunate to have the space, but you know that each game then you buy as a box will play. There's scenarios with each, and those guys like yourself, thank you for reviews, who've seen Scorpions in a
Yep, Scorpions in a bottle.
There will be one game scenario like that in each of the game boxes as well.
Awesome.
And that's what we're playtesting now.
Awesome. That's great. So Forgotten Battles is pretty far along, right?
It's discussions with Brian, Dean here, and Chip. It's going into development as we speak. there may be a chance it might be on pre-order by the end of the year.
Okay, that would be awesome. So I played it and enjoyed it tremendously. I don't know how much you've changed between now and last year. But from talking to these guys, it doesn't look like there has been any glacial shifts in it.
No glacial shifts, as you'll appreciate. There's always
fine tuning, yeah.
Special events, all the things that add value to the game, but the core system plays well.
Now, how challenging are you finding it? Because you're kind of designing 3 big games separately here, Third Winter and Forgotten Battles in Hero City, and as individual games. Now, how challenging are you finding it to mesh all that together?
Not as hard as I thought it would be, but then why are we play testing it like that? I don't like to critique other things, but I learned a little bit from the EFS system from talking to the guys there. They tend to do it a little bit. They did a little bit sequential to try and do the whole Barbarossa piece. But things develop over the period of time. Things change. You can get duplicates, and it then gets bogged down in rewrites and various other things. If it all if you go to the end point, old program business management, and then design backwards, and it all hangs together, Gary, then it's going to probably work. And it seems to be, fingers crossed, doing so.
So you've got, what, 10 people on this board?
Yeah, 10 people, because we want to plow through it. We want to plow through from the second 44 campaign to the end in the end of April, and we're making good progress. And I say, touch wood, we've played it many times. It plays well. Okay. When I say that, the Russians go west. There's no one retaking Moscow or anything like that,
right.
And
those responsible have been liquidated.
Well, you played it. The other thing is, it's fun. It's fun for both sides. The challenge was to make a fun game for the German player. It's fun. The Germans are strong. They can do this. The game moves in the general direction, and people want to play it again. And people, frankly, it's there's only a few left in relative terms. And MMP is going to sell out. So I'm delighted that people have supported it and bought it.
We mentioned that last week, folks. They're probably down to less than 100 copies at this point at MMP now. So if you do want the Third Winter, please do order it. So Crimea. So was there weren't there 2 parallel Crimea projects in the works, and they kind of put them all together for the Crimea package that we're going to see?
Absolutely. So dear Mark is a good friend. He's put together. He's been working on 4142. Obviously, people have reached out about Cross of Iron, Talon Peninsula, Steiner, all the rest.
Where the Iron Crosses throw.
So what we did was we sat down with Dean. We shifted the Case Blue Crimea map across because there was a lot of sea on the left of Crimea. Updated the map a little bit because there's some of the geography you wanted to change a little bit. It's got the Taman in it, and that fitted really nicely with the 26th September start, which brings in the Taman Peninsula, which ties in with the start for all the other games, Third Winter included. So you can play it separately. And I think 4142 is very interesting. We put all those 43 games in, and Chip and myself designed a Crush Crimea campaign, the May 44. So you've got many scenarios in that. It's a lovely one mapper of probably 10 games within that. And if you have the space, it's not a lot to add it to Third Winter, but it opens up the whole southern flank, Gary.
You're not leaving. You're going to be back in the morning, right? Awesome.
Yeah,
very good. Very good. I feel bad if you were leaving for the week.
And the final thing is, I think we want to try and put in small game, big game. So people who've got enough space, they can buy like a Smolensk, a one mapper, but hopefully can add to other games as well.
Yeah. And I mean, that's always been a strength of the series anyway. I mean, even in the big games, though, like the big games, there's tons of scenarios of different sizes and scales. So you could take up kind of the experience you're ready to take on right now. What's the footprint over here? Because I think you're folding one map panel under. It looks like about 12 by 5.
As a Brit, I'm very fortunate.
Well, you can give me meters.
Space.
That's okay.
You Americans, you have lovely basements and all this. So I think you're talking about 13 feet.
Okay.
By 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet. A couple of tables you need for the charts, and you've got to have a decent set of clippers, Gary. For you, because you're probably talking 7,000 to 8,000 calories.
Oh yeah, that's why my forearms look like this, folks.
And that 13 feet includes the Crimea map, right?
You're talking Russia from Helsinki, or Eastern Front from Helsinki to the bottom of the Taman Peninsula.
Yeah, so folks, just so we're clear here, we are talking the entire Eastern Front from Helsinki to Sevastopol at 5 miles per hex. So 13 feet, really not that bad. It'll fit in my, once the game room is finished, it'll fit in my lovely basement game room. So that'll be fantastic. I want to talk to you about your game room, actually.
Yes.
Because his game room is awesome. What's the footprint on that place?
About 20 feet by 17 feet.
Okay,
okay.
So Tony's got a gaming shed. Now, apparently it's kind of common to have like hobby sheds in the UK. I won't say it doesn't happen over here, but it's unusual. And that it's really cool. I really like your tables too. Those are really cool.
Well, they're model. The guy who did those does model railway tables. You know, the guys. I think the thing looking.
You think wargamers are obsessive?
Yeah. Well, but they're a meter high, which is like 39 inches in imperial, which is like a kitchen worktop. So they're easy to lean on, easy to get a bar stool under, easy on the back. They're 5x2, 10 tables. So you can configure them for most games. You can put them together. So that was very nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, it's purpose built. It's got the sports, internet, broadband, wine chiller, coffee machines.
Right. Well, I'm working on this, folks.
Says I can move in there anytime.
I'm working on this, folks. Yeah, I have not yet been banished to the basement full time, but it sometimes feels like it. So yeah, mine is not quite in the level of maturity that Tony's is, but yeah, it's really cool. So, and I've seen you have 2 huge games running at the same time.
I do. Yeah, we've had you can put up one of my playtest copies, say like the Hero City, the Leningrad one. I can put out a Napoleonic one. Look, you know, Marcus is here from the UK with me. There's Faz, people like this. So I have friends come around. There's a small cadre of people. And we have like gaming weekends, and the ladies go shopping or go out for lunch. This is all fantastic. That's because this is true culture over in the UK, folks. Tony, would you like a whiskey? We've poured this one just for you. A little sip. Can I take that?
Yes, please. Yeah, just bring me back the glass when you're done with it.
I will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
So let me make a small camera adjustment. Well, Tony's not here. Doug, talk some more.
Well, we're talking about how big is too big, really. Like you, I'm a big fan of big games. Don't mind complex at all.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, complexity comes with the territory.
I'm kind of come to the point where when I look at the counter count, and if it's less than 1,000 counters, I'm a little disappointed, actually, But that not to say that I haven't had a blast with smaller games. There's a space, there's a time and place for that.
Yeah, sure, me too.
Levy and Campaign. Speaking of smaller games,
you guys busted out Nevsky as a little side thing.
Yeah, it's a great little system. It's not terribly complex, plays pretty quick, beautiful components.
Spectacular box art, as we all agree.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting into Inferno, which just arrived.
Yep. Just got that. Check out the unboxing video. It's very fancy. And boy, the Italian wargamers they're loving it. I mean, it's hot. I mean, hot. Over in Italy, as you could imagine. So Garrison Ben, thank you very much appreciated. Stuka Joe's space is pretty awesome too. But Joe does filming in his, so he's got some considerations in there that the rest of you might not have. I will want to be able to do filming in there, which means I'm going to have to soundproof the room too. But we can talk about that. I have plans to that effect. John, I understand, John. I have been in this place before, but fortunately the new place is more than big enough that my wife can have her craft space and I can have my gaming space. And they do share a common wall, so we don't have quite the segregation that we would like, but I'm going to put insulation in that wall, so we're going to be okay. Spanish, a lot of wargaming in Spain, but Inferno is set in Italy, so the Italians are like, "Ooh, wargaming set in Italy. We hardly ever see this unless it's World War II." So, and then, let's say they're not super eager to talk about that particular topic, right? Yeah, we do not speak of it. So, but yeah, I mean, I'll have a video on this eventually, but I'm still working on the space. I mean, I got to do the shelving outside because of spell and sawdust and all that. So it's kind of taking longer than I expected, and I got to have the free time. So, all right. We'll get there. Hopefully by spring we'll get there. I said Christmas, but now we're looking at spring. So we got at least one more special guest lined up. We'll see if see if number 4 wants to stop in as well. Perfidious Albion says really depends on the topic and treatment. Yeah, I mean, let's say what's a wargaming topic you're just not interested in?
Me, gosh, that's actually a hard question because I anything from ancients to modern. But I'm not necessarily a big fan of like colonial era stuff.
Okay.
Okay. 1800s.
Right. So
I mean, yeah, I'll play the game if it's good enough, but it's nothing I'm gonna.
I'm trying to think of a monster game in that space, and I'm
yeah,
like, I mean, Pax Britannicus.
That's the one that pops.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably too much for some people. I mean, it's got a lot of paperwork. A lot of people balk at paperwork. I love paperwork. I was delighted to find out that Empires in Arms has paperwork.
Yes, I do not mind bookkeeping at all.
Yeah. So, and that's something that, that's a taste thing, right? For me, it's Arab-Israeli wars, and there's some pretty big games on that topic that I can name, right? Barlow's pretty big, for example, and Valley of Tears is going to be pretty big. I mean, I'm not sure it's going to be as big as Barlow, but it's going to be. I'll play it, which I wouldn't Barlow, and that's a topical thing, right? Not a judgment on that game at all. Right. William Aarons, thank you so much appreciated. We almost missed this, so because we're on tiny screen, I could have brought the extra monitor too. I got an extra monitor sitting around. William Aarons just ordered the P500 new editions of Barbarossa Army Groups North and South. Before they ship, I should find the time to learn and play Barbarossa Army Group Center. William, I suspect you might have ample time to do that. So I do expect to see those at some point, but I wouldn't expect to see them soon. Army Group North should be the next one. That said, one thing you have to say about that series, have you played that Barbarossa Eastfront series, the GMT Eastfront series?
A little bit.
Okay, me too.
Barbarossa Army Group South, way back when it first came out. The system never really clicked with me, and it was almost immediately thereafter, around the same time I discovered OCS. And so for me, OCS was an EFS killer.
Okay, I can understand that because, boy, there's a significant overlap there, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, the coverage, the unit scale is very similar. The map scale is exactly the same. So the kind of topically, we're kind of talking about the same stuff too, although the closest thing to a Barbarossa game that OCS has done is Smolensk, right? Which is July of 41, just July to September, which is a great game, by the way. Too bad it's sold out. And that's the OCS, there have been a couple different attempts to do that, like Barbarossa, all of it in OCS, and I think all of them have fallen down for one reason or another. But I think it's a challenging topic, frankly. I mean, especially for that first, say, 3 to 4 months. Yeah. And you do the whole East Front. How do you keep that engaging for the Soviet player, right? Yes, there are going to be like local counterattacks, and they're not going to be on the defensive 100% of the time. But it's going to be a lot of getting kicked in the face and running backwards.
Yep.
So, and that's a design challenge, right? And there are ways to approach that, right? One is no retreat, where it only takes an hour to do that initial phase, right? Instead of a month. So maybe that's a way around it, and that's not to shortchange no retreat necessarily, but it's something that didn't work for me, and I feel like I played a little bit of it too, and I feel like it worked a little better for me because I appreciate now what it does differently than OCS. It does have a couple of mechanics that I don't favor, like the soak-off attacks. Not a fan of that mechanic, generally speaking. But I find it tolerable when implemented in a non-moronic way, which I believe is the case with the Barbarossa games and with Battle for Normandy, for that matter. Anzio, not so much. I did not like the implementation in Anzio particularly, which I'm not sure if that was the originator of that mechanic or not, but that's a thing we'll explore at a later time if necessary. So this is true. Well, Stalingrad never came out, but even Kiev to Rostov is, a bit beyond Barbarossa, and Crimea is as well. The Crimea game extends into early 42, as does Kiev to Rostov, I think. I had a couple of them back in the day, and I sold them and then, of course, bought them again because that's what I do. But I'd like to give that another crack at some point. And we've got a number of in-development games here at Winterfest, and I don't want to talk about those necessarily because I don't know that their designers who are here are ready to talk about them. But kind of going in order here, we've got we have had Saratoga coming up from Compass Games. That's a very interesting looking design. We've got the Empires and Arms games. There's a side game of Nevsky happening. This little side game of Ardennes 44. Mark Simonich's titles are extremely well represented here. We've got a copy of Russian Campaign on the table. We have From Salerno to Rome on a table, but I've seen no evidence of anybody actually playing that. We've got 2 big tables of OCS, one of which is the 13-foot Ostfront game, and the other of which is the somewhat smaller, but still not tiny, Forgotten Battles playtest game. Now, that's what I played last year. I enjoyed it tremendously, and these guys are putting on a truly shameful performance as the Soviets. So we have, in addition, a Normandy 44 game. There was a Stalingrad 42 game that wrapped up about an hour and a half ago. There was NATO Cold War Goes Hot, which came down to the last turn. And, man, you saw the NATO dead pile, right?
I did not.
Oh, it was massive.
I'm like,
do you have any counters left on the map? I mean, he did, but boy, not many.
Yeah, I walked over there at one point, and he just kind of pointed at about 3 brigades. He said, "Well, this was 4 American divisions."
Yeah, this was West Germany. All these dead people.
Yeah.
So, and of course, as befits the Winterfest tradition, we've got the TV, and they've rented couches this year. So we have a lounge area where people can sit and watch
those couches.
War game
so
appropriate.
comfortable.
Yeah, they're pretty comfy. The one over here,
None But Heroes.
None But Heroes is going. Yeah, I didn't leave that out by accident, Doug. Thank you very much. Plus the Vakdam Rhine game. So we'll talk about that at a later time. The plus the Vakdam Rhine game that we're playing. So, Yield Geezer Gamer, I'm guessing you're referring here to War in the East. I'd say War in the East is a monster. I mean, it's still pretty big. You're not going to play it in a weekend, right?
Right.
SPI War in the East, which I have only really seen. I wouldn't say that. I've seen the first edition, but I've only played the second edition, which was the edition that then becomes part of War in Europe. Did you ever play War in Europe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got the DG copy of the SPI.
Okay. So have you played the DG or the SPI one?
The old SPI one.
Okay. Yeah, So let's not talk about that either. I don't actually have a super bad feeling about the DG War in Europe. But I do feel it was a bit of a missed opportunity. I have mixed feelings about it. Let me put it that way. It's nice. I don't think it really solves any particular problems that War in Europe had. Probably introduces some new problems. I mean, this could happen. We could appreciate that. This is going to be a problem if you're playing on Vassal too, right? We don't have necessarily the whole map in front of you. I found that's mitigated by having a really big screen with really high resolution. So you get like a 4K 50-inch TV. That's like the best Vassal monitor. It makes the experience absolutely amazing. So, no, I wouldn't say so. So I mean, we've had DG do new versions of SPI games, the whole spectrum, and I don't know how many of you've seen, but I've seen a fair number of them at this point. And they run the gamut, right, from straight reprints to straight reprints to so faithful that they incorporate the original mistakes that resulted in errata in 1978. So, and then from complete redesigns to kind of every step in the middle, right? War in Europe from DG is kind of a mild redesign because I think they added a production system for the Western Allies, right?
Yes.
The original has War in the East, War in the West, and there's a book that links them together. Mm-hmm. War in the East has a production system for the Germans and the Soviets. Yep. War in the West has a production system for the Germans and a reinforcement schedule for the Western Allies, which is weird. WIF borrows from War in Europe, right? With the production spiral.
Yeah, it was
right?
the old original WIF. It was a production spiral. They've gone to the production circle with, I think, the introduction of Final Edition in the 90s. But the first 5 editions, it was a spiral. And it's.
Yeah. So I wouldn't. I mean, it's a reprint, yes, but there is some redesign involved there as well. And probably work. I mean, if you're in the market for War in Europe, right? I mean, that's another one where it's a huge game, but it's not super duper complicated. For what it is, it's really pretty straightforward. I mean, I think that resulted in a number of holes, frankly, but which I think will be familiar to folks who have played War in Europe at any significant level at all. What's playing on the TV right now, folks, if you can't hear it, is the old Second World War, is that what it was called? The old documentary,
World at
War, narrated by Laurence Olivier. Which, if you haven't seen it, I think most of it's available on YouTube. And it's dated, but it's narrated by Laurence Olivier, and some of the footage in there is like, wow, somebody caught this on camera. Like, here's the Graf Spee on fire when it was scuttled. I'm like, so they caught that on camera? What?
The music throughout this entire series
it's
incredibly
British.
Yeah, that's very entertaining document. Historical accurate. There's some historical issues, but it's from 73, 74.
Yeah, something like
I think.
that. So,
but it from an entertainment value, it holds up even today. A must see, I think, for anybody interested in the war.
Yeah.
Speaking of too big, Frank Chadwick, I think, has an interesting take on big games and complexity, because I've got his Thunder in the East.
Yeah.
That first game in the alleged series.
You mean the only game in the alleged series?
Yes.
Okay, so
but
Frank and Ellen, feel free to prove us wrong on this. Anytime.
Yeah.
We're
the middle C.
sitting here tapping my foot here.
I know there's something existing. That
Yep.
Oh
yeah. No, that's on a table.
Yeah.
It's not vaporware.
And it's been for a while now.
It's not vaporware. It's just slowware.
Yes. But Frank kind of made the comment that his philosophy with a big game is to try to keep the rules fairly simple and straightforward, and the complexity comes from the sheer scale of the game. So what you don't want to, what he likes to avoid is probably what we're facing over here with God.
Oh yeah,
you've got these details, right? And you get so mired in the details that you kind of lose the big picture, the epic scale and scope, or you just get bogged down in it. So for his design, for his ETO series, he's trying to keep everything streamlined and straightforward. And frankly, playing Thunder and East, there's some neat concepts in it. You can see that I think it's the game that he wished the Europa series was back in the 70s and 80s. I think because the idea here, same goal, he wants to supposedly link them all together. Now that I think will be too big once you get them all together. But maybe if you link a couple of them together, and again, the rules are pretty straightforward. It's not a super complex system, so
and
it's got that going for it.
It's kind of set up so you can split it into tables too. So you could actually run it at a convention and have, hey, there's these 4 people running the east front, these 4 people running the west front, and these 2 people running the Mediterranean. And you might be able to make that work fairly readily and get through the whole thing. Even it plays pretty fast. So Frank asks, and Frank is known for making me think and giving me ideas for the show here. So he asks, do big games strengthen or weaken your understanding of the tempo of the historical battle, or does that immersion feeling not matter? I think it does to me.
Yeah.
How does the big game experience compare with reading a good, detailed historical account on the same topic? So to kind of work backwards through that, doing that in a game gives you an interactive experience, right, that you don't necessarily get from reading a book. The book may give you more detail, though, so that's not to say one is necessarily preferable to the other. But in terms of, I always feel like I'm pulling something out of historical understanding from a game, at least unless the game is an actual turd, which I've been blessed not to have to play so far in 2023. So we'll report further on that as time goes on. But
well, I could say an example from right here this year with Wacht am Rhein. It was earlier today, I think. Maybe it's yesterday. Wacht am Rhein has some command rules that require you to draw army and corps boundaries for your troops, and they need to.
Folks, we had to talk about this for 2 hours today.
I made up some half scale laminated maps from the game maps to kind of discuss and to draw the boundaries on. So the 3 German players were standing there at a side table having a rather in-depth discussion about we've got 4 roads.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, I gotta pee, guys. Come on.
We've got 4 roads that we were trying to put 7 panzer divisions down through really awful tight terrain. And to me, the detail in the Gauss system heightens that immersion. So I'm seeing firsthand what the Germans were dealing with back in December of 44. And you get an understanding of why things happened and why they made certain decisions that they did. You understand now. I have a much better appreciation for just how pissed off Piper was trying to drive those King Tigers on the route they gave,
Mhm.
and that's really
Mhm.
driven home by this design.
Yeah, and I mean the system in general, all the Goss games, but what really shines here is all those difficulties with road congestion and snarled formations, and having to trace a supply path on this track through the woods that nobody besides lone Belgian huntsman had been on for the past 5 years. The game is designed around that, and it really illustrates that very well. You see all those same elements in other Goss games too, but I mean, you could see why the game was designed that way for this campaign, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think it works really well, and that's another reason why I was like, yeah, let's do Dr. Ryan. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
In this,
Yeah.
having now experienced that in last Blitzkrieg too.
Mhm.
So, two extremely different ways to kind of put that experience on the table, right?
Yeah.
Richard Coker, welcome back. We had actually discussed this already. Any discussion of how much is too much is bound to involve this series, right?
Yep.
Now everybody's going to draw that line where they're going to draw that line. I'm going to draw that line just a little bit south of where the Second World War series is. Okay, my tolerance for complexity, and maybe a little south of a World at War as well. To be honest about it,
Yeah.
the jury's still out on that one. But I do feel like that might end up landing. Well, it's going to end up landing under WIF in my preference list of that topic,
WIF
right?
is that whole Advanced Third Reich World at War killer for me. WIF is much more fun.
Mm-hmm.
The experience I've had now. Not to say that WIF doesn't have its issues,
Oh,
and it does.
Fuck yeah,
It does, and I'll get into that too in the future here. But for me, WIF just has it so many ways over World at War. So.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it does so much more with what it lays on you, where a World at War lays so much on you for what it can do, right?
Yes,
You know what I mean? That's a ratio between overhead and effect, and I think that the ratio between overhead and effect is much better in WIF than it is in a World at War, if you ask me. There's other people who tell you something different.
Well, World at War sort of strikes me as rule by exception.
Oh Jesus!
Right.
Yes.
So you've got a rule, but then there are so many special circumstances and cases.
Here's a rule for the Sullivan brothers.
Right. So at some point, I would think as a designer that if your rule or your mechanic needs that many exceptions, that maybe you should rethink the underlying mechanic.
Maybe, but you can't question Third Reich either, right? I mean, it is a classic. Everybody loves it.
No
But
doubt.
that's
It was a game.
Oh, yeah.
A groundbreaking game back in the day.
No,
Very
nobody's
influential.
arguing that.
Very influential.
Yeah. Chip, come on over. So, folks, I'd like to welcome illustrious guest number 3. Joining us now is Chip Salzman. This is mine. Do we have another glass? Do you want a whiskey?
I have a port.
He's got a port.
Okay.
Every time I've tried port,
in a paper cup, very elegant.
Every time I have tried port, it has been tooth-grindingly awful. I'm displeased to report, but that's me.
Okay, but cheers to you guys.
Oh, very good, very good.
And I brought my own counter clipper.
There you go.
I've got the large version.
There you go. It hasn't broken yet, or have you had to repair it already?
I have had the bottom come off, but the screws went right back in. So
Okay, so that's not the usual repair, folks. So we're gonna first of all, of course, we're here at Winterfest, and the huge Ostfront is going on. So of course, naturally, Chip, my question for you is, what is your opinion of the Hubble tension between the measurements of the expansion of the universe between the cosmic microwave background and Type 1a supernovae?
I think the Chandra-Shankar limit is the real factor here.
Right.
And that's something you've got to consider, and that's going to throw all the calculations completely out the window.
Okay. I have to agree with that. So you're the developer on the Ostfront project, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So tell us kind of how that's going from the development standpoint, how it's going to kind of all fit together in development after Tony has worked his Tony magic.
Okay, so the Ostfront series of games is 4 OCS games, all covering the same period from late September 43 to April 1944. The third winner's already published. That's essentially Army Group South, from the race to the Dnieper to the point where the Soviets got Tarnopol and Lvov and broke into Romania. just south of it, the game that's going to go on pre-order soon is Crimea. That will have the same period of time from Crimea, but it's also a double game because it has 1941 and 42 being designed by a different designer, a guy named Guy Wild. And so
it's wild, folks. You should see it.
It's going to be wild, and actually, it's kind of cool.
The jokes never stop here at Ardwulf's Lair.
The Germans break in, the Soviets break in. There's a lot of very interesting.
And I've actually played the 41 scenario early on in the playtest, and I thought it was a fascinating operational puzzle, especially from the German side.
It's hard to do in both cases
because they assign to German commanders, you have to do this and break in and conquer the Crimea, and then they take all the troops away.
Right.
So
just north of Third Winter is the Forgotten Battles. That's Army Group Center with a whole bunch of bashing and crashing that they did. And to the north of that is the Hero City, Army Group North, with the relief of the siege of Leningrad and the retreat back to the lines in the Baltic states. But this is the OCS system, and the Third Winter model with Soviet fronts and the way the German forces operate is essentially something you can use the same model for all the games. Now, they're different because they have different force structures, they have different terrain they're dealing with. The Crimea has naval landings, interesting stuff like that, but they gang together very well. And so it's not a new development effort. It's a matter of extending what we already have. What we're doing now is we're testing it, and you find things. What if the Soviets want to shift much of their tank corps over here? How does that work in the model? What if the Germans want to do this? Does that make sense in the model? And we had already a huge Soviet surrounding of all the German forces trying to get out of the Dnieper Bend. The Germans counterattacked and opened a hole, and they've gotten those guys out again. I just came from a monstrous fight right in front of Orsha with there's probably 5 Soviet tank corps smacking, and they punched a hole. They're trying to decide whether they take an initiative and go for it, or if they're going to give up the initiative so they can continue to bash.
The existential OCS dilemma of whether they're going to take the double turn or not.
In the OCS. So the games, there's a lot of work to put them together, but the model from Third Winter really extends across all the fronts.
So let's actually talk a little bit about that, because I found the command model from Third Winter to be really refreshing, where there's kind of higher level headquarters. I mean, historically you've had headquarters, and they're just headquarters, right? There's headquarters with some more throw range and some with a little less throw range, and every once in a while you have a leg mode, a headquarters. But in Third Winter, there are higher level headquarters, and that idea is being used throughout the Ostfront series. Let's talk a little bit about that and why that mechanic was thought necessary and brought in the first place.
So it really started with the Soviet fronts. The way the Soviets operated, they had, I think, 12 or 13 fronts all across the East Coast, and the fronts were assigned by Stavka. They would be given, supply, objectives, and they would go basically till they ran out of gas,
or until the commander was liquidated.
Something like that. They would then kind of turtle up the way the Roman armies did. They set up real hard defensive lines. They'd rest, regroup. Other fronts would take on. So you have, they'd be active here, then they'd be active here, then they'd be active here, and we wanted to model that. And so we had to experiment a lot before we came up with rules that really the least rule for the most effect to mimic that and how it works. And the Soviets have a couple toys to play with. They have, turn that front off, move the boundary a little bit, have this one come on all of a sudden when the German forces are out of position. They also have the RVGK. These are the Soviet Stavka deep reserves. You pull units back there to rebuild them, but you can also pull units back them and poof, they appear over here next turn. So you can really do some strategic redeploying. And this is not a 1941 Soviet army anymore. These are some guys that pack some real punch, and so it is a knockdown, drag-out fight all across the board.
Yeah, even a 1942 Soviet army. I mean, there's a huge difference between the Soviets in Case Blue, which was my first OCS game, hilariously enough, versus, say, Baltic Gap, right? Yeah, but this is a little less stark than that, but there's still a significant difference in force composition and in what you can do with those forces.
The Soviets have not really perfected their deep battle operations like they would in 1944, but on the same time, the Germans are on the slide down from having, being able to do multiple core panzer operations. Towards the end of this, they were really getting into their fortification and Festung mentality, and losing all the capability to do their mobile operations that they did so well.
Doug, have you played Third Winter or any of the
A little bit.
recent?
I have it, yes, and it's quite good actually.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciate is the introduction of this higher level stuff, because to me it makes OCS feel fresh, right? It's still the same great system. It's 30 years old now, right? So, but it's a new wrinkle that doesn't change fundamentally the game system at all, but it adds another layer of decisions that I really appreciate.
Yeah, more
And
puzzle.
We want that to reflect national characteristics.
Yeah.
So the Soviet model is really good. The German model is, I think, good. I think we'll probably have it evolve once we publish the 4 games, we'll also have an Ostfront, overall rule, overall order of arrival, and probably some, having done it now and played with the rest of it, we may have some things that we would do a little modification of Third Winter with as we learn more about that. But a lot of that will be about how do we get the most out of the Axis headquarters system. And they were more flexible than the Soviet approach. And, if you applied this to, say, the American Army, you'd have a different kind of a thing. It's modeled a little bit like in Beyond the Rhine, there's the broad front strategy, and that kind of models the way that the Allies fought their war on the Western Front.
So you guys have been play testing the whole thing, all of it together for at least 3 years now?
Probably 4 or 5. It's the first time I saw the whole thing put together. When it was put together, altogether it's 4, 8, 12. There's 13 maps. There's upwards of 4,000 counters on there if you take all the markers into
right.
effect.
I didn't introduce him as Charles S. Roberts Award's nominee, Chip Salzman, by the way, which I should have. So I apologize for that.
No worries. This is not a small undertaking. In fact, we constructed
it is literally not a small undertaking.
A special table for it. But the thing
drills and chainsaws and jackhammers for about 4 hours on the first day.
Hey, you are a serious gamer when you bring your own lumber.
When you bring lumber to make a table to hold this thing. But the thing is, it's OCS. If you're used to a small one, there's different kinds of planning to do, but the system is the same, and it applies it to it. There's a lot of fine tuning. An upcoming game is Luzon, which is very small, intended for new players. And it's going to have a whole bunch of information for new players in the magazine that'll accompany it. We're also working on an article for a Third Winter, which is a whole bunch of fine-tuning techniques to up your game as a Soviet player. So I've got a whole bunch of hard-won lessons because I think the Soviets have the harder job in Third Winter. They've got a big army that's hard to move. So how do you get the most mileage out of what you have?
It's interesting, actually, because I've usually felt, maybe always felt, that in any given OCS game, the heavier lift is given to the player on the strategic offensive. And I think that's probably true a lot in war games generally, at least good war games, right? If the defensive player has the harder time of it, then maybe I think you might end up with an unsatisfying game at the end. But I mean, in say the Blitzkrieg Legend, the pressure's all on the Germans.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, the Blitzkrieg Legend is to run the Germans well is like PhD level OCS play.
We didn't get that in our game, folks. So we got ineptitude and people getting shot in the back of the head.
But I think there's 2 challenges. I think it's very difficult to do a mobile defense well. So you've got to know when to come in and bash and when to back off. And the Soviets they've got a lot of army to move around.
Oh,
so
yeah.
How do you do that well? It's big. It's like driving a Zamboni. It's not a subtle operation.
And sometimes the Zamboni is on fire.
Or sometimes I think of it like a giant flood of molasses coming across the map. Whereas the Germans, they have a really effective rapier they've got to stop this thing with.
So Professor Salbian says, and there's some games that have done this, right? Shouldn't late war Russians and OCS have a revised sequence of play to demonstrate they've actually learned their lessons and put the blitz back on the Jerry's?
That's a great question. So if we get into 44 and 45, they perfect the deep battle and what I'll call theater-wide offensives. So it will be not simply a front on, a front off, and so forth. It'll be a whole bunch of guys with even more improved forces, because when you think about it, in 1944 Operation Bagration, they went to Minsk in about 4 OCS turns. It was fast through defenses that had stymied them the year before, but they learned the lessons and applied them. So yeah, you'll see Soviets that are even more proficient when we come to 1944.
Yes. That would be, East Front Series, right?
I'm going to throw my clipper into the fire.
It'll break on its own. You don't have to actually throw it. You don't have to actually set it on fire. Pretty Salzman says probably the reason why the EFS sequence of play won't work for mid to late war. I'm not convinced that it won't work, but I do think whatever they end up with, it's going to end up being challenge to that design without necessarily changing the sequence of play and whatever arbitrary date you manage to do that.
Exactly.
And
hey, Brian, how you doing?
I don't think that I don't think the OCS model is not that, right? You're modeling the differences in doctrine using other tools than the sequence of play.
Yeah. So, and when you give the kind of units that you have with the Soviets, you have to play them differently. You don't have high AR, many of them like the Germans do, but those things are, they burn out fast. You can,
I know.
So you have to play the two sides differently, and so that's and if you're playing beyond the Rhine, the Americans dump artillery on stuff as we are wont to do.
Absolutely. All right, Chip, I'd like to sit down with you over the next couple of days because I know you're going to be here all week with Tony and Dean, and we'll talk about OCS. But thanks for stopping by tonight.
It's a pleasure.
And hopefully you guys may be done here for the night. I'm not sure.
These Soviets are making a very difficult initiative decision, and I don't think they've made it yet.
They may not have.
We'll see. Anyway, we'll be here for a couple
The
days.
same thing happened last year. Slightly different situation, but the same type of thing.
Thanks very much.
Where they had to struggle to make that decision. Chip, thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
There you go, Pernod. Very good. Stigler, you're a lucky man. So I got some pictures on social media, and I got some more pictures that I haven't yet released to social media of the big Ostfront game, including some of the situational stuff. One thing you notice in OCS, right, is just how dramatically this entire situation could change in like 1 or 2 turns, right? It's like, holy shit, this breakthrough. I'm shitting my pants, and I'm not sure what to do, and I'm going to have to run backwards as fast as I can. Suddenly there's, we see this historically too, this huge eruption of the front until a new front is able to form, right? And that's a huge challenge for the Germans in that game too, is how fast, because you want to delay the Soviets as much as you can, right? You want to counterattack to inconvenience them, and a well-timed German counterattack might not. I saw this was done to me in Third Winter. A well-timed Soviet German counterattack might not create a big losses or anything like that, but it could disrupt Soviet plans for half a month. Right? Because I've got this problem in the front that I have to go deal with instead of preparing elsewhere, and I have to direct resources to this and reserves and tank corps and stuff like that to deal with this problem, rather than preparing the tank corps for the offensive I was planning to do. So it's a really neat. It's really neat to kind of see the game evolve over the course of a big convention like this, right? You'll start with a situation and you'll have a lot of dramatic things happening and big swirling battles or sometimes grinding waves of attrition as the Red Army advances forward inexorably, right? As we saw, but even in Forgotten Battles last year, we saw a little bit of breakthrough where the Soviets broke through behind the river, which is, I think, the Dnieper. And the Germans like, shit, the Germans, what are the Germans going to do? That was their backup defensive line, right? So, we gotta make do with that situation. So
one of the things that what I like about OCS as opposed to EFS, because we mentioned the sequence of play, the different sequence of play that EFS uses to model the different capabilities and doctrines of the various sites. But OCS doesn't do that. They've got their action rating. OCS, if you want to run your Soviet army like a German Panzer Corps, you can do that in OCS, but the results are not going to be what you want. So it's on the player to figure out what's the most effective way to use what he has. The game system doesn't dictate how you're going to run your armies.
Yeah.
That's for you to, and that's what I really appreciate about this. That's what I like to sink my teeth into.
And I found that as much as it was Smolensk that kind of got me to, having at that point played a couple of OCS games, that really kind of got me to say, I think I got it now about the OCS supply system. Third Winter did that for me for the Soviet army. Because you start to see how their tempo has to be guided, right? What their operational tempo looks like, what kinds of attacks it's smart to make with the Soviet army, and what preparations you have to make to get those attacks to happen, because you've got a lot of slow lumbering rifle divisions, right? So and you've got the front mechanism where fronts are on or off and on and off and on and off, and it's like what are the lights in the background, which lights are on and which lights are off. And just running that it adds like a whole new layer to the operational puzzle, right? Because the timing is very carefully constructed such that you have to plan. You can't just say, well, we're going to be off this turn. Yeah, I'm going to go. I'll be back. I'm going to go grab a drink. You got to plan that out, or you're going to fumble and you're going to have a dead turn in between turning fronts on and off. And very undesirable. So really encourages you to plan that ahead. So what are the big games that you really want to get played that you haven't managed to get played yet?
Well, Atlantic Wall, Ghost Atlantic Wall is still on that list.
Sure.
That's up there. Let's see what else we have. Last year here I played The Greatest Day, GTS system. Gosh, I really like that system. That's a gorgeous game. Utah now is.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. Let's see. I've been in such a goss. Of course, I got Whiff Project going on right now, but that's getting played. Man, that's a good question. Atlantic Wall is, like I said, I'm in a goss mood right now, and I'm sure if you ask me the same question 3 months from now, it'll be something else.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Maybe. Hopefully, I'll be hip deep in an Atlantic Wall game.
Well, hopefully. I'll tell you what. I mean, I think you got the sense of this. I was pretty sore at the end of Friday when after the setup. So we had like the learning Goss game set up in one of the fellas' basements, and he had a bathtub flood immediately above Wacht am Rhein, and it flooded and basically blew out all of 7th Army and the accompanying U.S. formations. But he's got a copy of the old Wacht am Rhein, the original Decision Games printing back in 2005 or 2006, right? So it's like, okay, we could use these counters. Fine. And he got, new maps and stuff like that. But the factors are different, right? The factors are the same, but the layout on the counter is different. They don't put the movement on the counter. There's like a sequence of maybe there's 4 factors at the bottom of the counter. Some of the unit designations are different, and some of the listings in the setup are different. So everybody goes to dinner, and I'm left holding the bag on the setup, and then I hit the point at which the units got flooded, and I'm like, fuck, I can't find any of this stuff. What am I even looking for? And I just gradually got more and more steamed. And then everybody came back from dinner, and I had said, no, go without me. I'm going to finish this. And it's like 2 hours later, and I'm like, I'll be back in half an hour. I got to cool off. And I went and cooled off and got Taco Bell. I was so visibly angered at Taco Bell. Not at them. I didn't take it out on them. But I was so visibly enraged that they gave me a free Diet Mountain Dew. Yeah, so like, no, your Diet Mountain Dew's on the house. You could use it, buddy. So by the end of Friday, I was like, God damn this thing! I hate this game. Now I'm feeling great about where we're at. Right, I think we're having a real good experience with it. But it's a bulge game, right? It's going to be brittle. And the challenge with a big bulge game, in particular, that you're going to play for the whole week is, did we just play for 2 days and waste our time because the game took a shit on day 3, right? I mean, I'm pleased to say that the shit has not yet been taken as of day 3. So,
and that, but that is a danger. Speaking of big games, a lot. World in Flames is a great example of that. I've played tons of Whiff over the years, and I have seen, if you want to call it critical luck, there's some moments. I mean, there have been several games where even the weather, you get a string of really freaky weather rolls, and that can shut that game down in 1940. You know, that's early in the game, but it's still 20, 25, 30 hours of gameplay you put into it.
Yeah.
And so that
feels bad. That always feels bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the dangers, I think, of these big projects. But for me, I get my enjoyment out of playing the game. So all right. So this game went off the rails, but did I have fun while I was playing it? Did we get to 1945? Did we get to the end of the game? Well, for me, in a game like Whiff, if one side is basically resigning or said, that's it, we're throwing in a towel, to me, hey, we've reached the end of the game. This game ended with an Allied victory in 1941, or it ended with an Axis victory in 1942. So I'm not necessarily concerned about getting all the way to the end, as long as I'm having fun in the process. But you do have that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, of course. I mean, to me, it's about having the experience of sitting down with the war game and exploring history and all that. And as long as I'm having a satisfactory experience with that, then I'm happy. But I could certainly understand why to have invested 20 or 30 or 50 hours in and then have the game get derailed. Hopefully, with somebody saying, I just don't think I can win this, I concede. That to me is perfectly okay. What I don't want to see is, we have to abort this because of a rules mistake.
Oh yeah, right.
And let me tell you, Goss is real sensitive to that. If you, as I think I already said, if you don't understand the movement sequencing, you might not be breaking you might be breaking the rules, and you may not be, but you will absolutely shit the game up.
Oh yeah.
If you don't get all that sequencing, you're not going to get it 100%. But if you don't get it at least 90%, especially as the Germans in the first couple of days. That's going to result in a very blunted German initial offensive, and that's going to end up with an aborted game on day 3. Right.
Yep. And Bulge, like you said, Bulge games in particular, the first couple of days are so critical to setting up what's going to be a competitive or fun and interesting game. If the German offensive is stillborn, because either it could be some freakish die roll, some freakish luck, or just an error, strategic error, rules error, that's not fun.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't want that to happen, and you want everybody at the table, not just you, to have had a good time, right?
Right.
So, that's our goal here, and we've had to make a couple of adjustments, like firing Montgomery, for example. So Montgomery has taken command and promptly been fired. So there's a Monty takes command condition. There's like tons of conditions in this game. In this case, it's like X number of in-supply German units out east of Houffalize, which we got by a certain date, which we got. So Montgomery has the Allies are somewhat panicky, and they have put Montgomery in command. And so what ends up happening, and bear in mind, we're on day 3 of the campaign, right? We've been playing since Saturday. So what happens if you trigger this, then like on the next day planning turn, there's like a bunch of things happen, which include a strategic withdrawal by one Allied corps, and then a 5-day lull. Now we don't, we're going to get through. It's not like a front-wide lull where we'll do the turns real fast. It's a one core area lull. So what that's going to look like is for the rest of the convention, one core area is basically turned off. And we felt like, this is not going to feel good. So we just kind of all agreed to say, Montgomery's in charge, but he has been fired. He was in charge for like 6 hours, and is cashiered by Eisenhower, because he finally pushed Eisenhower over the edge, and he couldn't take it anymore. And he told Churchill, get rid of this guy. I can't deal with him anymore. And so U.S. Third Army's in the game now and has some stuff assigned to it. And that's not really going to have a huge impact for the Germans, but it will, of course, affect the way Allied logistics flows in and all that stuff. And of course, maybe we should talk about that as a is that too much in terms of the Goss logistics? Because there's kind of a lot there, right?
In defense of the designers and developers, it seems like this Monty takes command rule was meant to model the withdrawal from the fortified goose egg around Saint-Vit, which Monty came in because I think Gavin of the 82nd was hell bent against withdrawing. Although I think Hasbrook and 7th Armor said, "Yeah, we need to get out of here because we're getting chewed up." But it's meant to model a very specific historical event, which I think in most games isn't necessarily going to play out. You're not going to have that historical situation if you start on the December 16th campaign start date. So the Gauss rules are much more scripted than a lot of other Bulge games.
Yeah, by all those conditions. Yeah,
by this, because they've got some other issues with the northern shoulder and shutting down U.S. 5th Corps,
which can happen if the Germans underperform up there.
Right. So in this particular, now if we were playing like this at home, if it was me and you or whatever, we're meeting weekly and we're going to play all the way through January 8th, the end of the campaign.
Right.
Yeah, maybe we see how this works, or if it's a different game situation. But here at the convention, we don't really want to deprive one of the American players of,
right,
2/3 of the
because
guys.
That's going to be most of the rest of the convention.
Yeah, 5 game days. We're getting through about little over 1 game day per real day here.
Yeah,
so,
day and a third a day.
Yeah, so we're here to push counters, have fun. We're going to bash our heads together. So we mutually agreed to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, Monty's getting the boot. We're just going to keep everything active and go. And I'm not sure the lull rules make a lot of sense in this particular Gauss game. The other games where the campaigns are 3 or 4 months and you're looking at 90 or 100 game days, shutting a part of that down for 5 days, probably not. It's warranted historically.
Sure.
It's not gonna really ruin the experience, I think. So
right, yeah. So we made a judgment call on that, and it's okay. And yes, does it advantage the Allied player? Yes, I think. But if we hadn't triggered that, I'm not sure it would have made a difference, right?
Yeah.
We just activated U.S. Third Army, which I guess is an advantage because they're not splitting the supply anymore, right? Or they're not directing everything to one army.
Yeah, it's not going to, I think, have too much impact on the Americans just because they don't use the full Gauss logistic rules.
That's true,
in Vakdam Rhine.
Which we do, the Germans do.
Yeah, the Germans, that's going to come phased in by day 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But the Americans, they've got plenty of gas, they've got plenty of ammo. So, but they are going to have to draw that command boundary that we were talking about and kind of separate the northern half from the southern half. So it'll be a little inconvenient.
And you've got to respect those command boundaries too, right? So we've got, of course, they're 3D printed because we do this now. Boundary markers for the Corps and Army borders. And you've got to respect those, right? You can go out of them, but you have to end the movement back inside. Or you are out of command, which means your movement is halved and you got some other restrictions. So you are really encouraged. This is one of the things that really appealed to me about Gauss several years ago when I first started looking at it, was the fact that this is kind of built in, where you've got these command restrictions, but you're also free to reassign anything you want, right? There's a 7th Army Artillery Battalion that we have reassigned now to 5th Panzer Army, right? Because they needed it more. So I think we're good, Dave. I think we're good. So thanks.
Well, it's nice too because you've got the command rules, and the command rules tie in real nicely with the supply and logistics rules. So that's one of the things that I've been real impressed with. The logistics portion of Gauss, I think, I would say it's simpler maybe than OCS. OCS, where you've got the discrete supply points that you're moving about the map. It doesn't work that way in Gauss. You've got kind of a joint logistics phase at the beginning of each game day. So there'll be 3 game turns of that game day. And I think it's very simple and straightforward mechanic where you're going to determine your fuel levels and your ammo levels by army, then for that and formations within the army down at the core level. I like it. It's a real smooth system that provides a nice historical effect.
Yes, and I think it's, let's say, I feel like these rules have been pretty challenging for them to write. Let me put it that way, right? So you've basically got a logistics value for the army, and it'll say what it is in this scenario. But then you have an assumption that the army is then supporting 3 corps and that the corps are supporting 3 divisions or equivalent formations, right? But if you don't, if you support more or less, then you have to adjust that number up and down by individual core. And I can only imagine Doug Johnson pulling his hair out over, how do I explain this? It's really not particularly complicated. Once you see the moving pieces, right? Once you see it, okay, here's what we do. Here's what our ADV is. The cores have the same ADV, but the army is supporting one less core, so the ADV is one higher. And the cores are then supporting one less division than they could support, so their ADV is one higher. So the individual core ADV is two higher than the army ADV from the scenario. It's really hard to explain and really easy to show you how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It may take 20 minutes to explain it, but when you see it work,
right, it's like,
you're like,
shit,
that's what they mean.
this is easy.
Yeah.
Right, and there's some rolling and some tables and stuff like that, but I mean, it's really not that complicated.
No, and there's a two-tier, kind of like in OCS actually, it's a two-tier supply system here where you've got your general supply, which would be the equivalent of the trace supply in OCS, where you're tracing a supply path from the primary supply sources to the army headquarters, down to the corps headquarters, to the divisional headquarters, and then out to the units themselves. And then you have the logistics side where you've got the discrete supply points and tokens in OCS. Here, you've got truck points is your currency that you're going to assign to your army. All of the supply is done by army in Gauss. And those truck points will be given to you. You've got to decide how you're going to allocate them among your three different tasks of fuel delivery, ammo delivery, and motorizing your leg units. And then there's a couple of charts, a couple of die rolls, and you've got your logistical situation set for that army and its subordinate units for the day, for the next 3 game turns. So it's a nice, pretty quick, ironically, for a system that's so detailed and complicated, the logistics is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, even though it looks absolutely hellish when you're like reading the book and you're like, what the fuck is he even talking about? Once you actually start working with it, it's actually pretty straightforward. But because you're planning the entire day out, you really need to plan that, right? You can't just do, we'll just fuck it, I'll just do it this way, blah, 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 blah. You got to like plan it out, right? So it encourages player planning, which I always like to see. It encourages thinking ahead and trying to anticipate your opponent's moves, which I always like to see, which I'm not very good at, but, hey, we're working on it, right? It's a work in progress. So, there's a lot of really nice things here, assuming you are willing to put up with the overhead, right? There's a lot of hairy little things in the combat modifiers, for example, so you've got like combat reserve that can support your attack, but then defenders get there's like a regimental integrity bonus, but defenders can pull that in from adjacent hexes too, where attackers have to pull that in from combat reserve. And a lot of this stuff results in, okay, hold on, let's look this up and get it right. In an 80-page, is it 80-page rule book? 96-page rule book, right? So not a compact rule book exactly. So, the assumption built in here is that you, the player, are willing to deal with this overhead. If you're not, that's a completely reasonable decision to have made. But if you are, then, you get a lot of reward out of this kind of thing.
Well, we mentioned soak-off attacks. I think EFS has that.
Yes, it does.
And it's an old mechanic going way back.
To the 60s.
Gauss doesn't require...
Like Bobby Vinton.
Gauss doesn't require soak-off attacks.
Correct.
But what they do is they give the defenders a column shift if they have adjacent defenders to them that have not defended against a ground assault themselves in that same combat phase. So there's a motivation there for you, if you're going to make an attack, to maybe attack 2 or 3 hexes to avoid that combat shift. But then again, it's that detailed planning that you could get into both on the defense. When you're setting up a defense, you want to make sure you have mutually supporting units because it's going to make your defensive line that much stronger. And then on the attack, how do you go about peeling that line open the least costly way? So if you like planning, if you like the detail, Gauss really does seem like the system that you really want to look into. It's got a lot of neat stuff in it, but a lot of overhead goes along with that.
The playtest kits, Gauss news you can use, folks. The playtest kits for Over the Rhine have literally arrived this weekend to those people. Fantastic. Over the Rhine is the next Gauss game, Operation Market Garden, plus the whole sector, right? It's not just Market Garden, it's that whole area from September to December. 44th. Not sure it's going to cover the shell. but yeah, it's going to include the shoulders as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Joe has for us on that. The maps have been done for a little while. I know that.
Okay.
So that is they have just sent the playtest kits out. I guess I should have asked Tony about his upcoming thing from Decision Games. I forgot to mention it. East Front Battles. It's sort of an evolution of the old Army Group South Quad.
Okay.
From SPI, new series of games. 2 of them will be out this year. They're available for pre-order on Decision Games website. Stigler has, of course, ordered duplicates of each one so that he can make sure that they grace his shelves at home. And I would just like to also say, Stigler, that you really missed the boat here in failing to call them bad decision games all these years, rather than calling them derision games, because bad decision games really has the oomph to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, as much as I really like
a lot of their games.
Right now,
but yeah.
There's still some things that just drive you nuts. You're like, why did they do this?
Right.
This and it's all kinds of just weird little things. I think the map is attractive.
Very.
But there's some
hairy stuff on that.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you've got this place where 3 hexes cross together, and the road crosses like between a millimeter of that spine. I'm like, Joe, I'm fucking dying here.
We're playing on an enlarged map.
Yes, we are.
Where like about 30%, I think.
30%.
It's a beautiful map to play on.
It is. All the maps are very attractive, in my opinion.
This stuff is real clear on this map.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back and look at, when I get home, at my copy at the original maps, and it's frustrating. You love it, but then there's these things that just drive you crazy about
right.
it. Why did they do that?
I mean, just like little development things, like they left out some markers, for example, you could really use, right? So we got all the little color blocks and all that shit. So, we're covered. But you've got like the generic spade markers, which they kind of made a lot of hay out of, which, okay, you got a generic marker for stuff, but I'm not going to use that for everything, okay? No. I'm not going to use that to mark bridges because I can't find the bridge markers. There's rotary markers for tracking things like number of vehicles that have crossed over a bridge. While that rule is in effect, that rule eventually goes away. There's a lot of development that didn't happen before publication that would have resulted in some enhanced mechanics, enhanced components that we didn't see. And the player community for Gauss is so small that while some of those things have like been done by the community, not that many of them have, right? I want to say, actually, that with the exception maybe of Concept World Expo, this is like the number one Gauss event, right? We have a Gauss game every couple of years, right? And I know they did some Gauss Game On too, in Seattle. So good for them. But and somebody actually might live out there. I don't know who, but somebody actually might live out there too. That's either Doug or Joe or somebody. That's why they did it. But I know they've had it there before, and at WBC as well. But we reliably. Not every year, but there's more often than not a Gauss game. Yeah, I mean, we played Atlantic Wall, I think 3 years ago, and about a couple years before that, there was a Vocht am Rhein game, and there's talk of it every year. So if we get the people, how big would I say the Gauss community is? It's quite small, right? I mean, as communities dedicated to individual games go, ASL has the biggest. I feel like, right? I mean, that just seems obviously true. OCS has a big, robust community. I mean, they have 8 tables running at Consim World. Not that I've been there, but I see the pictures.
There's a lot of OCS
so, in contrast, there's like one Gauss table at something like Consim World, and it draws 4 or 6 people, something like that, right? So, order of magnitude smaller than OCS.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And maybe comparable to something like a Der Weltkrieg or something like that.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Which doesn't seem to have gotten a lot of traction over the years, but I also feel like it's picking up steam a little bit, maybe because some content creators are featuring it now. And I think there's a lot to recommend that system,
too. I would like to see that maybe catch on and get a little more exposure, because like I said, I haven't played a lot of it, but I have played some of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of neat ideas there. The map certainly is interesting. And I know that
it takes some getting used to.
I know that turns a lot of people off, but trust me, you do get used to it.
I got used to it after 2 turns.
And the way it works, it does. you really kind of have to rewire your brain.
Yeah.
What you're used to with whole hex and hex side terrain, but it really changes a lot of things around it. It's a nice way to make more detailed movement without a bunch of rules.
It's very elegant, really.
Yes,
it's just it's visually it can be very confusing. I've heard some people, Ted Racer says it literally makes him physically nauseous.
Sure.
And I'm not going to tell Ted he's lying, right? I mean, okay, but I don't get that. But certainly it can be visually confusing. And also there are places where the hex grid doesn't have sufficient contrast. You'll have noticed.
Oh, yes.
So you can like see the hex sides, but you're having trouble making out the hex grid because they all kind of bleeds into each other.
Yeah.
Until you start putting counters on there, which by their positions kind of help to define where the hexes are.
Yes.
That's a graphic design flaw, but other than that, I think the map is playable and fairly interesting. We could do Brent. I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about next year. Okay. We got a plan. Still got to get this year's stuff done, which means I got to get not one but two sets of 3D printed counter trays done for Third World War, probably in the next month, which is about how long it'll take my printer to do it. So I am willing to entertain all kinds of different ideas. Jeff Miller says, so I mean, a lot of people have heard about it, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that say, this looks kind of interesting, but like, if I go by Voc Dem Ryan, it's like $170.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like so. All of the games so far, this is a barrier to entry, right? And why I think that Hatton was a really good move, even Charles S. Roberts Awards winning Hatton, by the way.
Hanut.
Oh,
you're talking about the magazine game, right?
It's Hannett. We're here in Ohio. Hannett.
France 1940.
Right. It's not in France either. So Hannett. So that was a really good move because it gave people an entry point into the series, even if it was a stripped down version, right? Without a lot of the extra overhead.
I mean, it went from a 96-page Goss series rulebook to 16 pages of rules in the magazine game.
They left some things out, right?
A little bit, yeah. But I would like to see Goss. I would like to see Goss more of the early war stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Heck, I'd like to see the East Front. I got a laundry list of items I'd like to see Goss handle. So, but and it's very reasonably priced compared to the boxed games. The 4 boxed games, you're over $200 for most of them.
Right. I mean, I think Atlantic Wall, last I checked, MSRP was like $260.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, it's 7 maps and 16 counter sheets and an inch and a half of paper in it.
Yes.
It's a lot, right? You're not getting stiffed for your 260. But that's a big ask for an unfamiliar game system, right? I don't know anything about this.
Yep.
But the point of entry costs $170 plus. That's a huge gulf that you have to get new potential players over. And that's why Hanut was, I think, a good choice. They got a couple more of those in the pipeline, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, which is great. I think there's a Sedan one, for example.
Nice.
But or I might be thinking of BCS2. I'm not sure. There's a lot in my head right now. But it's pretty challenging to get people into it. Stack all that on top of the fact that previous versions of the rulebook were like not just problematic, but like aggressively bad.
Yes.
Until this current version of the rulebook, we have not had a rulebook that deserves the adjective usable.
Yes.
The previous versions were absolutely opaque.
Yes.
To the point where, like, the original ones, even up to Atlantic Wall, was like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to figure out how to play this. This looks so tangled because there's a lot of interlocking mechanics, and you really kind of have to understand a lot of it to see how it's going to work. And the rules just didn't convey that.
Yep.
It just said, okay, well, what about this other situation that applies to this situation that is in this section of the rules? And it led to years of questions and grilling of Joe and Doug on Consim World.
The 2020 rulebook that was released with Lucky Forward was a huge step forward. Now, it still has some issues.
It does. It's not perfect. But man, it's better. Holy cow.
And the play aids that were included with Lucky Forward are excellent, but there's like 8 sheets of play aids that have a ton of great info on them, but it's so hard, as we are finding out the last few days, to keep these things organized, to find the one you need when you need it. I wish they had spiral bound them so you
Yeah.
could just fold it back and lay it flat to
Yep.
find what you need to keep them
Yep.
organized. But the info on them is great. They could use
Yes.
I mean, they're not the most graphically appealing. Some graphic design could really make
Yeah,
them pop a
color
bit.
coding was my
Yes,
thought, right?
Exactly.
I can make that happen. But also some of the play aids are on 11 by 17 sheets.
Yes.
It's like, why
Yes.
did you do this? Was this just to inconvenience the buyer
Yeah.
into having to fold these or
Yeah.
cut them up or whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So John Long, I guess we'll close with John Longshaw's question here. Is so Vakdam Rhine by DG is better than SPI. I don't own Vakdam Rhine by SPI, and you said you hadn't played
I
it.
have not played it. No, I've seen it.
So-
At
me
Tempe.
too.
Yeah. At Tempe, but I've never played it.
So my understanding is that it's a game that's maybe not as broken as, say, a Highway to the Reich, but still is probably got some significant bugs in it. And that's kind of in line with a lot of SPI larger games, right? That once you start playing it, you start to the flaws become very obvious. This is true of War in Europe, right? War in Europe's full of holes. It's a great experience, don't get me wrong, but it's full of holes, right? I don't think anybody is going to be, I am a War in Europe player, and that is what I play. Nobody's doing that because it won't stand up to that. OCS will stand up to that, and frankly, I think Goss will stand up to like a lot of repeated play as well. I'm not sure that the any of the SPI soapboxes will. And ironically enough, the one that I'm least sure about saying that about is Campaign for North Africa, which is the definitional game of this is too much for me, right? Although, as we've said before, I wonder how people would approach that game now with laptops and spreadsheets and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
That will help you a lot with a lot of that accounting work that you're forced to do. Okay, folks, I think we have had a fabulous show tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. I'd in particular like to thank our very special guests, Dean Essig, Chip Salzman, and Tony Burkett, all the way from England here to Ohio. That's how much he loves this event. So, and Doug, of course, thanks very much for coming on. So we'll have some more video from Winterfest, but in the meantime, I need to go to the bathroom and get some hydration and maybe stop drinking scotch for a couple hours. So, but I won't be going to sleep anytime soon. So we're going to pull, maybe not an all-nighter, but I'll be up late. All right, folks. So thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like the video. If you're watching this after the fact, thanks for doing so. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and consider becoming a patron. It's the best way to help support the channel. There's a link to the Patreon in the video description. So everybody have a great night from Winterfest in sunny Sandusky.